Can you hear me now, Philip?
Yes.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I'm not sure, but anyway. Okay, thank you. Should we just recap on the apologies, please, for absence?
Apologies for absence from councillors Mark Bainham and Sam Bateman.
Okay, thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting, can I take those minutes as agreed? Agreed? Okay, thank you. Declaration of members' interest. Are there any declarations of interest this evening? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. In relation to item 6, I know the landowner professionally. As a landowner is the clerk of Culwaltham Parish Council, but only in that context. And I also know all the members of the Neighbourhood Plan Committee in Pulborough, obviously, but I see neither of those as being prejudicial to any discussions.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Likewise, I know the chair of the Parish Council and I know the members of the Neighbourhood Plan for Pulborough, but only on a professional basis. Thank you. And there will be an announcement when we come to that item. Item number 4, announcements from the chair. Nothing from or chief exec, nothing from the chief exec, but I will just point out the application for Old Clayton Kennels has been withdrawn this evening and is not on the agenda. Item number 5, appeals. I draw your attention to list of appeals on the agenda pack. Are there any comments? Councillor Circus.
I know there are not many appeals reported this month, and we know that that's because we're not actually dealing with as many applications as we would normally. But I sort of got the impression, and I know it's a very small base from which to form any impression, that we're not being very successful in terms of our appeals to the inspector. I wonder whether that impression is a reliable impression, an unreliable impression, and if it's a reliable impression, I wonder whether the officers have any views as to what might be the cause of that. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sarkis, for your question. Well, clearly, just 4 appeals is not a reliable interpretation of the success of the authority as a whole. You know, you would have seen from previous agendas, there's a significant number of dismissed appeals, particularly around water neutrality. We can certainly provide figures to members, but you know, I have no concerns at all. These particular ones, you've got HRA. So HRA is a particular application following a prior approval where the applicant seeks to demonstrate water neutrality. So in this case, the planning inspector considered the development water neutral and allowed it. Having read the decision, that you know, it's a matter of judgment, and I don't think there are any particular concerns there in terms of how we assess water neutrality. The other application at Bailey Paddock is the conversion of an existing barn. Permission had already been granted for a holiday let, and the proposal was for a market dwelling, and the inspector considered it acceptable. So I think that they're matters of judgment. I'm not particularly concerned by those, but clearly we need to continuously monitor our success or not at appeal. Thank you.
Any other comments? No? Okay. Before I move on to item number 6, which is DC 212466, Green Stane Street, Pulborough. So that I can speak on this matter, the chair will be taken by Joanne, Councillor Knowles, but I need someone to propose that. Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Okay. All those in favour? Okay, I hand the chair for this particular item to Joanne Knowles, as Vice Chair of the Committee.
Thank you very much. So can we call our first speaker, please? Claire Bartlett, who has 2 minutes. Claire. Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Claire. I've jumped ahead. Apologies. So, yes, could we first of all call for the presentation from the officers?
Thank you. The application, the application site lies at the northern edge of the Poolborough built-up area boundary off the A29. The site wraps around the Sainsbury's car park site, which is an elevated deck, and abuts the railway line along the southeast side. Trees within the site are subject to tree preservation orders. The site is not allocated in the Poolborough Neighbourhood Plan for development, which has advanced through examination stage but has not yet been formally made on account of ongoing water neutrality matters. The aerial view here shows the site in relation to the Poolborough built-up area boundary and shows the retained separation to the Codmore Hill built-up area boundary just to the north. Also on this plan, you can see the red block at the bottom of the aerial view, which is where 170 dwellings have been permitted in outline under a previous application. The site, as you can see here, is well defined by hedgerows and vegetated boundaries, and the bottom view shows the site alongside the A29. As you can also see, the elevated car park deck, which abuts the site from the Sainsbury's supermarket. The proposal seeks outline consent only with access submitted at this stage. All other matters would be reserved for approval at a later stage. The outline proposal therefore seeks permission for 64 dwellings, and the indicative plan here shows how those dwellings could be delivered on the site, along with necessary parking, the open spaces, play spaces, provision of affordable units, which would be 23, whilst maintaining separations to the retained trees on site, tree groups and the TPOs. The layout has been revised throughout the time the application has been under consideration, which now accommodates officer and consultee comments. And the quantum of development has also been reduced from 70 to 65 dwellings. The indicative street scenes show how the development would respond to the location and the sloping site, with a palette of indicative materials and architectural forms that are suited to the edge of village location. Access to the site would be from the A29 directly into the site by way of a new Bellmouth junction. As you can see, a separate right turn lane would be delivered alongside or within the A29. Access arrangements from the public highway have been under separate discussions with the Highways Authority, and there's no objections raised from the Highways Authority in relation to the proposal. The indicative landscape enhancements shown on this plan would retain many of the existing trees within the site, along with the creation of new hedgerows and planting opportunities within the site, thus securing a biodiversity net gain. The Council's ecologist has reviewed the detailed ecological surveys and reports that have been submitted, and subject to the necessary bat and dormouse licences required from Natural England, are satisfied with advising planning conditions. Similarly, the Council's landscape and tree officers are satisfied with the proposed layout now and advise conditions to secure relevant mitigations. To deal with the water neutrality requirements arising from this site, the calculated baseline of new water use would be partly offset by way of the existing bungalow on the site, which will be demolished to make way for the development. Further on-site measures include water efficient fittings to reduce water use and grey water harvesting, which will be reused for domestic WC flushing. The remainder will be offset by way of water saving measures achieved at Hepworth's breweries. Officers have been to the brewery to see and understand how the water savings will be delivered. In short, the water savings will be delivered within the cleaning process, not the brewing process, as incoming water quality is essential to the quality of the beer that is produced. At the moment, all water used for the cleaning and sterilisation processes, including sluicing of floors down after spillages, comes from mains water. Much of the cleaning process is carried out manually, and the efficiency measures being proposed would address those and would introduce a degree of automation. Other savings would be delivered by capturing some of the wastewater and then reusing this within the next part of the cleaning process, which significantly reduces the amount of clean mains water necessary within the process. Officers have calculated the proposed savings being identified to ensure that there is a comfortable headroom in the figures. The savings that can be achieved have taken the full year figures from the brewery in 2022 to provide an overall pattern of water use, and the uplift in production in the first part of 2022, which equates to an increase of about 10.9%, sorry. It's noted that the brewery currently operates at around 68% of its capacity and is not subject to an upper limit on water use within its production processes. As such, the brewery will always rely on a significant input of mains water in its production processes. The savings, which will be delivered by way of the proposed water efficiency measures on this site in order to facilitate development on the Green Dean site, would reduce the necessary clean water within the cleaning sterilisation processes. Thank you. Oh, sorry, apologies. Officers recognise that the site has not been allocated within the local plan and is not one of the allocations in the final Pulborough Neighbourhood Plan, although it had been promoted as part of the Neighbourhood Plan process. The site is no longer allocated in the Reg 19 draft local plan either, although it had been in an earlier Reg 18 document. Therefore, officers fully acknowledge that the proposal conflicts with the spatial strategy priorities to locate development within the built-up area boundary or on allocated sites. However, it's also acknowledged that the council can currently only demonstrate a 2.9-year housing land supply, and that the current local plan is over 5 years old, both of which diminish the weight afforded to HDPF policies in relation to location of development. Accordingly, the NPPF paragraph 11 would be triggered, which applies the tilted planning balance. Therefore, when viewed in the planning balance, the provision of 65 houses, including 23 affordable units, is a significant benefit arising as a result of the proposal. The proposal does not raise any adverse issues in terms of neighbour, amenity, or prospective occupant amenities. And furthermore, matters of flooding, water neutrality, landscape, biodiversity, and access can all be satisfactorily dealt with. In applying the tilted balance, officers therefore consider the proposal raises no clear reason for refusal and therefore recommend approval subject to the conditions shown. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Right. Claire, are you ready for your 2 minutes?
Absolutely, thank you. Good evening, councillors. The planning application will deliver up to 23 affordable homes and 42 open market homes. These will go some way to addressing the council's housing waiting list, which has grown by 25% in the last 5 years, and the council's housing land supply, which now stands at just 2.9 years. The site meets all criteria.
Can I just stop you for a second? Can you pull the mic a bit closer to you? We're not hearing you very clearly. Thank you.
The site meets all criteria in the council's FAD document against which schemes like this should be assessed. The site was also allocated for housing in the Reg 18 version of the emerging local plan. As we understand it, the only reason why the allocation was not carried over into the Reg 19 plan was due to concerns about the possibility of the site adding to existing drainage issues. The planning application has, however, shown how this will not be the case, and neither Southern Water or the lead flood authority have raised any objections to the proposals. In addition to much needed homes, the application will also deliver around 1.4 hectares of green and open space, which equates to about 40% of the site. It will also deliver significant biodiversity net gain, including a 25% increase in habitat and a 31% increase in hedgerow. There are a wide range of facilities within walking distance of the site, including lower street businesses to supermarkets, a primary school, train station and bus stops. Residents would not be reliant on private cars to service their day-to-day needs. The application has no objections from technical consultees, and whilst any objections from local residents are always regrettable, the application has received just 12. This is a very small number for this type of application in my experience. In summary, the application proposes much needed open market and affordable homes in a sustainable location, delivering significant biodiversity net gain and open space. You will also hear in a moment how the application will benefit a local business. It is therefore hoped that you'll feel able to support the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. And our second speaker this evening is Jason Morgans.
Good evening, councillors. I represent Motion, who are the appointed drainage and transport consultant. We've worked on this project for 3 years, and I understand the issues of particular local concern relate to drainage, flood risk and transport. So I cover these matters in my 2 minutes. Dealing firstly with flooding and foul drainage issues, the planning consultant has explained why the site allocation has been removed in the Regulation 19 plan. Notwithstanding, the council has stated that there is potential to demonstrate that the drainage issues could be overcome, either as part of the current planning application stage or during the continued preparation of the local plan. In short, we have done just this to the satisfaction of Southern Water and the lead local flood authority. Southern Water's original consultation response confirms that they can facilitate foul sewage disposal to service the proposed development. Local members raised the issues with officers again more recently, and officers reconsulted Southern Water. For a second time, they confirmed that this development would not impact the network. The Southern Water's duty to provide suitable capacity within the network for new developments. Southern Water also advised that issues reported on Stain Street historically have been contributed by blockages and a collapsed sewer, to which Southern Water have attended and rectified. They also advised only one reported incident of flooding on Stain Street due to hydraulic overload of the system in the last 10 years. The lead local flood authority, Southern Water and Network Rail, have all confirmed they have no objection to the scheme on flood risk or drainage grounds. Southern Water have legal obligation to provide developers with the right to connect to public sewers, and network reinforcement are delivered by them through the infrastructure charge. The purpose of the infrastructure charges are to fund improvements on the existing water or sewer network, to provide development related growth, and to ensure that sewer capacity is not a barrier for development. In relation to access, concerns relating to pedestrian access to local services, including St Mary's Primary School, have been raised by the Parish Council. This journey involves...
Jason, can I ask you to conclude your comments, please? Your time is up.
I've only got 3 more sentences here. Involves crossing the A29 twice using established crossing facilities comprising refuge islands, dropped curbs, tactile paving and suitable pedestrian visibility in both directions. The narrow footway across Pigeon Gate Bridge includes guardrailing and protect pedestrians from passing traffic. The road safety review that accompanied the planning application did not raise any concerns regarding the route. Furthermore, the Highway Authority has raised no objections to the scheme, and it can therefore be concluded that the existing pedestrian route between the site and local services is safe and suitable to accommodate the small increase in pedestrian movements resulting from the proposed development.
Thank you, Jason. What long sentences you have. Andy Hepworth was supposed to be speaking, but I understand he's been delayed and that Claire Bartlett is going to do his 2 minutes. Claire, if you can speak up a bit, it is quite hard to hear you. Thank you.
So Andy unfortunately hasn't been able to make it here this evening, so I'll read out what he had wanted to say. Andy Hepworth is the chairman and founder of Hepworth Brewery, which is based in Pulborough, and these are Andy's words. We moved to our current location at Brinsbury in 2015 with overwhelming support from the council for our plans, which has allowed us to continue trading within the Horsham district. Our site employs a significant number of local people and provides a specialist training centre for brewing. We are, we are also a popular visitor attraction in the district. When we built the brewery at Brinsbury, we were keen to make it as energy efficient as possible. We use solar panels and an anaerobic digester for power. Heat from our beer chillers and fermenting beer is captured and reused to heat the offices, visitor centre and water used in the brewing process, but we want to do more. We use vast volumes of water daily to wash down equipment and know we could make substantial water savings by employing new technologies and automated systems if we had the capital to invest. When the applicants approached us almost 2 years ago to collaborate with them to find a water neutrality solution for their site, we were delighted. The applicants funded specialist consultants Projective to identify ways in which water savings could be made. They identified several opportunities for water recovery, which would save the brewery over 3,000 cubic metres of water per year. This will increase as production increases in the future. The applicants will be funding the water savings measures at an estimated cost of £236,000. The application is a collaborative effort, which will be a significant benefit to the brewery. Reducing our environmental footprint is very important to us, and we hope you'll feel able to support the planning application. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Claire. And then our third speaker this evening is Andy Tilbrook, who has 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm Andy Tilbrook. I'm representing Pulborough Parish Council, but I also chair the Pulborough Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group. For those of you who don't know me, before I retired, my job was as Deputy Dean of the Faculty of Engineering, Science and the Built Environment at London South Bank University. So this is an area in which I've got considerable professional experience, as well as my other hats. Here, I'd like to note that this particular site was considered and rejected by the Pulborough Neighbourhood Plan at every single stage of the consultation process. And each stage we had to get Horsham's endorsement to move on to the next stage. So it was rejected at Regulation 14, Regulation 15, Regulation 16, Regulation 17 and Regulation 18. And it was also rejected by the independent examiner who came along. So we're very pleased that Horsham had changed their position on their latest own structure plan, and that the latest version does not include this site at all. Now, why we rejected it is, I think, also important. There were several sites north of Pigeon Gate Bridge, which we rejected for exactly the same reasons. These reasons relate to many factors. First of all, one of the previous speakers mentioned the highways being safe for school kids to walk down. It isn't. The path is so narrow that it's hard for a mother with a pushchair to walk down once you're off Pigeon Gate Bridge. It's narrow. We have heavy lorries on the road and they frequently have wing mirrors which overhang the pavement. It is a chronically unsafe thing to have for mothers and children to go on. At the bottom of this site, we actually made provisions in the neighbourhood plan. I'll just get up and down here next to the railway line, on the New Place Nurseries site, we made provision for a railway bridge, which would, if constructed, will allow safe passage of school kids from the north of the village without the need to cross the A29 twice. That is a vital part of our neighbourhood plan, and we very much look forward to seeing that come forward in the full planning application for New Place Nurseries, and we look forward to seeing it being accommodated at the bottom end of this site. Without that, there is no safety for pedestrians from the north, going from the north to the south of the village. The other point is the sewerage and drainage. This is an issue which I still, even though I'm not on the parish council any longer, I still get called out about a couple of times a year because the contractors for Southern Water don't know where their flipping sewers and drains are. And there have been repeated blockages over the last 10 years. And basically, a mistake was made in an earlier development of Pulborough Medical Group and the Tesco store in Pulborough downstream, which has meant that a stream which flowed across the site is now culverted, which means that drainage water which flows downhill from the north and the south has nowhere to go quickly. And I was interested to note yesterday that there were Bowsers from Southern Water at the bottom of the valley taking away excess water because the sewage pumping station cannot cope. We need to ensure in future developments that this problem is fixed. This will involve a pipe going under the railway bridge and being taken down past the new and interesting triangular house down to the pumping station, which is up by the entrance to Tesco's. Now, this is a problem an infrastructure problem which must be fixed before we consider anything north of Pigeon Gate Bridge for further development. And we have got a neighbourhood plan which takes us to 2031, and I hope we'll be considering this site and others north of the bridge when we have to do a revision so that our plan matches the dates of Horsham's plan and goes from 2031 to 2040. But that process will require, I believe, developers to be able to ensure that we get the necessary infrastructure improvements. And those will include making sure we have that footpath over the bridge, will include making sure we have enlarged sewerage and drainage facilities, which currently just simply cannot and do not cope. I'm very happy to give anybody a tour around. And also perhaps even entering into negotiations to get the current culverted stream opened up as it used to be before these problems started arising. So those are our reasons for objecting. We wish to work with developers to secure developments from 2031 to 2040, but for now we have more than met our commitment under the neighbourhood plan, and this site is
Thank you. Can I ask you to conclude?
Yeah, I'm just in my last sentence now, genuinely, we need to get the commitment of developers to help us provide those infrastructure improvements, and we need to get safe footpaths over the bridge, and say the sewerage and drainage system is more than full now. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our speakers. Officers, are there any comments?
In relation to the delivery of the footbridge, that is scheduled to be delivered as a result of the outline permission to the south of the railway bridge. So as far as we are aware, that is being delivered between the developer and Network Rail. As within the report, there is a reference to the sewage Southern Water, who have confirmed that the issues north of the bridge, so in relation to this site, that there's no capacity issues in relation to this development, and they are aware of previous issues which they have confirmed have been resolved in the vicinity of this site. And therefore, in relation to this site, there's no perceived capacity issues in relation to the provision or the drainage of sewage or foul water. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The local ward members, Councillor Clark and Councillor Campbell, who would like to speak first? Oh, your name's gone. Here we go.
Thank you very much. So whilst I'm aware that there is no 5-year housing supply and that 65 houses would be a useful addition to the supply, and obviously we have heard that the new site would provide support to a local business, of which I'm a fan. I have a number of concerns, and I think I'm going to repeat a lot of what Dr. Tilbrook said. I'm worried about increase in traffic. One of the previous speakers said that obviously that there are good transport links in Pulborough. I would dispute that. And in terms of using the train, it's quite a significant walk for someone to walk from this new site to the train station. I suspect most people would jump in their cars and drive down the hill and park in the car park. It was also mentioned that walking from the site to the school is safe. As Dr. Tilbrook said, it really isn't. You do have to cross a very busy road twice. There is an incredible amount of traffic along the road, The footbridge across the railway line is narrow and only allows for one person to cross at a time. And as someone else mentioned earlier, you do get overhanging wing mirrors from lorries crossing the bridge. Although in sewage was mentioned, although in the report it says that there is capacity for sewerage, it was also mentioned that there have been issues with runoff rainwater combining with the sewage and causing spills. And this is only going to get worse, I think. So adding more sewage, even if there is capacity, isn't going to help anyone at all. And the last couple of points, I think when the new junction's created, the people coming from the north down the A29, obviously there are significant, although I think the speed limit along there is 40, people don't stick to the speed limit. They come flying around the corner, and I can only see that literally as an accident waiting to happen. And the last thing, obviously, is that I am a member of Pulborough Parish Council, and I have sympathy for the fact that this site was not included in the neighbourhood plan, although this is not made, and that I think there should be an element of the wishes of local residents being respected.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Chair. I think one comment I would make before moving on is if the railway footbridge the officers mentioned is basically a core part of the village structure, then that could always be, this development could always be set in terms of a Grampian condition on it before going ahead. But I'll move on from that. Whilst I realise a new planning application cannot rectify existing infrastructure, I must emphasise my belief that sewage and surface water infrastructure in Pulborough can't cope with what's there already. The selective interpretation of an email which I found in the evidence I find quite interesting, because the gist of an email dated 9th of January, which comes from the Southern Water Sewer Network Manager. Yes, he does advise that the issues reported on Staines Street Close historically have been contributed by blockages and a collapsed sewer. I know because I was there. From personal experience living on Codmore Hill, every winter we have sewage running down the street or across the gardens into the local watercourses because of inadequacy of the sewer system, coped mainly by the sheer volume of material. And by material, I mean surface water runoff and sewage. The operational email actually does say that London Road has tended to be in hydraulic overload. I think I quote the email, and have issues with the sewer become inundated with surface water as well as foul water flows. The foul water from this development would actually add to that problem. So what's been said so far, I think, is a bit economic, because if you go further downstream, you'll see where the problem is, and that is a problem that we well know. That was a major factor why the neighbourhood plan rejected this site and others on Codmore Hill until such a time as Southern Water addressed the issue. I have not found in these documents any such mitigation measures, but I'm quite happy for officers to point me in the right direction. You will have heard from officers, and it is from others, and it's mentioned by officers' report, the Pulborough neighbourhood plan went to inspection, was accepted by the inspector. During the inspection, this inspector will have examined carefully all the sites that were turned down. It's quite clear that the inspector believed that the objections to this site to come forward were valid and accepted the neighbourhood plan as it was drafted. Nothing has changed since then, apart from water neutrality, I suppose. This neighbourhood plan has been nearly 10 years in the making, but a lot of work and effort has gone into it, and therefore we owe the villagers of the village the opportunity to comment on it. The subject of water neutrality remains an issue. I've had several exchanges of correspondence with the officers on this subject, and we both respect each other's opinions and positions. Let's just say it's best if we agree to disagree. I acknowledge that one could argue in logic that water mitigation would free up, in inverted commas, water for the development. But as I've mentioned to several people, the brewery is running at, I think the number was 68%, I was working on 60 to 65% of nameplate, but it's an industrial process. So any brewer worth his salt would be looking to run at 100%. So that will increase his water consumption, no matter whether he's trying to save water on water bottling, water bottle washing, and vat cleaning. So basically, we would seek to reduce the impact of water extraction on Horsham, and yet we're not doing that because, in fact, It's the opposite. I'm not going to conflate the issue of industrial usage of water. It's just that officers use water mitigation in the context of housing, which is basically more or less static, or at least comes out in the wash, so to speak. In this case, it's different. So my concern is a mitigation case is a strategy that's based on an industrial process, not a domestic setting. And therefore, for me, it's a bit of smoke and mirrors. The developers say that any increase in water consumption that the brewer would need planning permission. This is tosh, because all he needs to do is to turn up the wick on his brewing and he will use more water, and he doesn't need planning to do it, and that's fine. I've looked with interest at some of the ecological reports, in particular the ones relating to wildlife. Now, a lot is made about bats, and there are lots of bats around this area, and the ecological reports actually have cited them, and etc., and mentioned them, and the surveys have picked up lots of bats. And that's to be expected, because of the Men's is not that far away. And I'm glad that I actually managed to get the trees on the site protected with TPOs a long time ago. I think that was a win, at least. However, I'm very disappointed. I can't find any mention of tawny owls in the officers' reports or in the environmental reports. This is to say, in the winter and in the spring, any time between, let's say, 10 p.m., midnight, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, we can hear tawny owls. I don't know what the mitigation process is or procedures are for owls, but I'm disappointed to see there's nothing mentioned in the reports about owls. I think this is a bad oversight. It's possibly less of a planning issue, and I wait on officers to comment, but for a council it's meant to be all about greening, rewilding, etc., there's nothing much about owls in this. So I feel a bit disappointed in the report, and I understand why we are where we are, but still not happy. And I won't go into the other details because some have been already mentioned. So I wait to see with interest what my fellow councillors might say about all of this. But I think I've said enough. Thank you.
Yes. Would you like to come back now on that? Or wait, officers?
Just as a general point, councillors, I think we just need to be mindful that as officers, obviously, we're very sympathetic with the parish's position in terms of where their neighbourhood plan is. Ultimately, in planning policy, you have to determine it on the circumstances today, and where we find ourselves in a 5-year, no 5-year housing land supply position. So we have to be mindful of that. We can't reject a site in principle because it's not in the neighbourhood, in the neighbourhood plan. That is not a sufficient reason to refuse an application. I'll let my colleagues comment on the very details, but we think we have to be mindful of where we are, what is the policy context, and what are we considering today. Thank you.
I'll just dip in on a couple of points raised by the councillors there. Quite right, the purpose of the planning system is not to rectify existing infrastructure issues, and you'll see from the report that officers have asked Southern Water repeatedly for their comments around the foul and surface water issues that have been flagged by the community, and Southern Water adamant that it's not a reason to refuse permission here because there is sufficient capacity and the issues that have been identified have been resolved. I appreciate, I'm not trying to claim that residents are not speaking the truth there, but we have to go on the evidence in front of us from Southern Water, which is saying that that's not a reason to refuse permission here. In terms of the brewery and the question of what happens when brewery production increases, well, all that matters here is that there's a saving of 9,000 litres per day from the efficiencies to the bottle washing situation. So, for instance, if production increases by 10%, so there'll be 10% more mains water used for bottle washing, and so therefore the efficiency will rise by 10%. So instead of being a 9,000 saving, it'd be near a 10,000 saving. So, and all of this is based on the fact that there is no limit on the brewery being able to up production levels to the capacity of the site. That could happen at any point. The point is that in all scenarios where production increases, there'll be 9,000 less litres of main water used because of the infrastructure that's being put in to mitigate this development. Thank you.
Right, so I'd like to invite Councillor Ellis-Brown to speak now.
Thank you very much. Sorry, my notes here. I won't go into some of the points that my fellow ward councillors have raise, but I want to raise a few points here. One on water neutrality. I'm conflicted here and confused actually how you can save more water by producing more beer. Especially when the ratio is 3.5 litres of water per 1 litre of beer. So the more beer you produce, the more water you're going to be using. So I can't see how you're going to be saving more by producing more beer. As the officer points out, they're saving 9,000 litres per day. As per the paperwork from Water Environment Limited, dated the 5th of May 2023, identifies a saving of 3,365,000 litres per year. The site is saying it's going to be using 3,140,000 litres of water a year. Therefore, the savings, the headroom is 225,000 litres of water. Or I put it another way, that's 4 litres per person per day. So if that site, everyone on that site chooses to drink more water, which isn't in the calculations, by the way, it won't be water neutral in my calculations. Highways, I'll move on to highways. We've just heard about the risk to people walking along the A29. If you could just put a slide up for me, showing the New Place Nursery development adjacent to this, the red area. Right, you can see there, bottom of the screen. That is New Place Nurseries. In their outline application that was approved, that is 170 homes. That site will deliver 68,000 more vehicle movements along the A29 north of Pulborough through this junction, where people are walking on very narrow footpaths because they can't get in any way. The road isn't safe, yet highways seem to think this is safe. There will be 70,000 vehicles, and this is from the applicant's announced transport statement, 70,000 vehicle movements a year from this new development. That, coupled with the 880,000 vehicle movements along that junction, pretty close to over 1 million vehicle journeys a year along that A29. The road cannot cope with that. We've got more potholes there than there is in the rest of the country. The displays on that junction are not correct. They've actually said in one direction we got 41 miles per hour, and the visibility at the junction is 90 metres. At 41 miles an hour, you need a visibility of 120 metres. And we haven't got the visibility in the other direction, sorry. So I think this is unsafe, although highways will argue that it is, but they always used evidence-based. If nothing's ever happened, it's not going to happen in the future. Not familiar with the dynamics of mathematics, and things don't remain constant. Noise, interesting one. This one here, I found that, I considered that Acoustic Associates did a train noise survey in a 2-hour period. So therefore, they did a sample of 14 trains out of the 130 that travel along that line at the bottom there between those two developments. 119, there's 119 trains according to Acoustic Associates, which is wrong because it's 130 if you talk to Network Rail, and they took 14. That sample size is too small to have any high degree of confidence in it. If you were to have a high degree of confidence in that, the variability in the sound levels would be plus or minus 20%. I can say that as a statistician, a fellow of the Royal Society of Statisticians. That variability, based on an average of 74 decibels in one direction and 72 decibels in the other directions, means it could go up to well over 80 decibels. So I'm sitting in my garden, that's 80 decibels, and in the other directions, just under 80 decibels. Put it into context, a toothbrush, electronic toothbrush is 55 decibels. And a huge train going through is going to make just a marginal increase in the sound at those gardens in that development. Finally, the prematurity. Although Pulborough's neighbourhood plan is not made, therefore it doesn't carry the weight it could do if it was made and if we had a local plan. However, we now have, with this development, if it is approved, with the development on the bottom of that screen, we would have 235 houses approved out of 252 that we identified in our neighbourhood plan. And this isn't on our neighbourhood plan. That is over 90%, that's 93% of the development that we consulted on our community will have been approved. And yet we've not given them the opportunity at a referendum to vote on it. I understand prematurity in the referendum and prejudicial to that referendum is very difficult to prove. But there are cases, unfortunately not in law, but in another council where the inspector has said, because of the size and the scale of the development, it is prejudicial to the outcome of the neighbourhood plan. So I think we just need to be mindful of that. Ask for the officers to respond. Thank you.
If I can just come back on a couple of points and then I'll defer. Just in terms of water neutrality, I think it's useful just to move away from the figures a second and just think about the principles of how the proposal for water neutrality would work here. So you have a business, Hepworths, they brew beer. We don't want to restrict how much beer they brew, and they don't want to restrict it. So whether or not this development goes ahead, they will continue to brew beer. If the market's good, they will brew more beer. And that will happen notwithstanding this development happening. They will continue to perhaps use more water as they increase their market. That will happen. But what this development will do was ensure that there is a saving, no matter how much beer they brew, they will save water. So, because ultimately they will brew that anyway, that will happen. So by enabling water efficiency measures within the cleaning process, it ensures that there is a water saving. And so that's the logic behind it. I hope that is helpful in your understanding. Before I defer to colleagues, just in highways terms, members will know it's incredibly challenging to substantiate a reason for refusal on highway grounds. We know the tests on highways grounds is a very high bar to meet. Obviously, we have no objections from highways here. And whilst it's clear, I've heard them, there are local concerns, I've not heard any evidence that would substantiate a reason for refusal on highway grounds that we could evidence that appeal. And I think that's what members need to be mindful of when they're thinking about highway concerns. I'll now defer to my colleagues in terms of noise, prematurity, and acknowledge we haven't picked up on your ecology point, Councillor Clark, so we'll cover that now. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to pick up the point on the tawny owls, tawny owls are not protected as a species, but nesting birds obviously are under the Wildlife and Countryside Act. So the preliminary ecological appraisal that was carried out on the site did not specifically refer to tawny owls, but it did consider the fact that there's the retention of wildlife habitats, so trees and hedgerows on the site. There's also a woodland block to the south of the railway line, which is unaffected by the proposal. So in terms of ecology, there's no concern over the loss of habitat for breeding tawny owls, because that is considered to be retained largely by the site proposal. However, we are suggesting wildlife sensitive lighting and naturally the carrying out of any works outside of the nesting season, which would be as part of the ecological enhancements. So just to confirm that tawny owls are not specifically listed by the Wildlife and Countryside Act as a protected species by themselves. In terms of the traffic movements, the traffic statement, which is based on 70 dwellings and not what is being proposed at the moment, which is 65, it has made the assessment based on 31 additional movements in the morning peak and 31 additional movements in the evening peak. And throughout the day, that is calculated to be 301 additional movements arising from the site. So highways have made their assessment based on those figures, which, as I said, is an increase over what is currently being proposed. In terms of the railway noise, our environmental health officers have reviewed the proposed noise assessments, which have been revised, and additional information has been provided for the environmental health officers throughout the course of the application. And they are satisfied with the details being provided at the moment, that there will be no adverse impact on prospective occupants and their living conditions. Thank you.
I may respond to the issue of prematurity raised by Councillor Ellis-Brown. And Councillor Ellis-Brown very kindly shared the inspector's decision on another site outside of this district with us before this meeting, where an inspector agreed that a development that's coming forward not in accordance with a post-examination pre-referendum neighbourhood plan would prejudice that plan-making process. Now, just to explain that context, that was a scheme for 35 homes in a village where the neighbourhood plan had a single site allocation for 15 homes. And in that context, the inspector felt that a site coming forward that would double the number of homes to be delivered in that area would be so detrimental to the confidence of the community in the plan-making process that it was highly likely that the neighbourhood plan would fail to pass referendum. Now, if we compare to the situation in front of us today, we have something like 280 odd homes across 6 allocations within the Pulborough neighbourhood plan. So this site would be a 25% addition to that. There's also a further commercial allocation as well. There are also other benefits for the community in progressing a neighbourhood plan through the extra SIL receipts that can go towards infrastructure in the community, as well as also now the benefits of a 5-year protection under paragraph 14 of the MPPF. So long and short of it is paragraphs 49 and 50 of the MPPF do allow for prematurity to be considered a material consideration. However, you must be satisfied that there would be the local community or the plan making process would be so severely prejudiced that it would undermine the concepts within the plan that's coming forward. Now, the advice of officers in this situation is, given the arguments and the benefits of the neighbourhood plan as I've just set out, is that a development coming forward here, in officers' view, would not prejudice the plan making process in this case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I now open the debate? Councillor Serkis.
The first point I'd make is on the question of highways. I won't say very much except to say that the Woodman's Farm application, which is coming back to us again, shows that on occasion the views of county highways on an application are, to put it mildly, questionable. What I don't understand is this. The officers have said we can't reject a site because it's not in the plan. But what we heard from Councillor Clark and indeed from Dr. Tilbrook is that site was not in the plan for a number of reasons. That the inspector has looked at this site, has looked at those reasons. The inspector could have made the point that it should have been included or looked at more positively. The inspector did not have a problem and clearly didn't question its omission from the developing plan. Now, the officers have told me in relation to inspectors' opinions that they have to be regarded as a material planning consideration. I ask myself this question, therefore: why is the opinion of an inspector on the omission of this site from the emerging Pulborough neighbourhood plan not a material? Why is that opinion by an inspector, in this case, not to be regarded as a material planning consideration? And the final comment I would make is this. We have 4 parish councils in my ward. And I have to say there is a growing feeling, which was certainly came across at the last parish council I went to very strongly. Why do we bother with neighbourhood plans? There is a feeling that Horsham is far too ready to ride roughshod over the local plans, which they have worked so hard, great effort, great expense to produce. And there's a feeling that Horsham does not respect those neighbourhood plans. And they're beginning to wonder, well, actually, they're not beginning to wonder, they've wondered for some time. Why do they bother with neighbourhood plans? And as far as I'm concerned, our job as councillors representing communities is to fight for our communities. And in fighting for our communities, we need to be seen to fight for those local plans which have been worked on with such effort by the local communities that we represent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Circus. Yes.
Firstly, councillors, it's obviously a lot easier for officers if we were to refuse this application. We're not recommending approval for any other reason than our professional view, having balanced all the policies, is that at this moment in time, with our emerging local plan carrying limited weight, the policy context in which we sit, with a lack of 5-year housing land supply, is that it is our professional view that we should be recommending approval for it. So that's why the decision is before you today. In terms of the local plan inspector and the position there, you have to bear in mind that just because a site is not allocated doesn't mean that it's never acceptable for development. And ultimately, what you have to consider, why were the reasons why it were rejected? And obviously, as part of a planning application, you submit a huge amount of evidence to support your position. And not all of that is available at the time that the inspector was considering that site and the parish were considering it. You know, we have up-to-date information on a huge raft of matters submitted as part of the planning application. And clearly you have to be mindful of why the inspector, what their concerns were with this site, but ultimately, are those matters addressed? You know, and if you feel they're not, what evidence do we have that they're not addressed, which would conflict with the significant raft of professional statements and evidence base we've had submitted as part of that planning application? That's what you need to be mindful of, is of course you need to consider why it was rejected, but ultimately officers' view is all those technical reasons have been addressed, and there's therefore no valid reason in which to pursue a refusal on this application. Now, if members are minded to refuse it, you need to think about how to substantiate that reason. You know, the officer's view is there isn't a reason to substantiate, and that's why you have the proposal before you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Manton.
Thank you very much. I'll just pull up my notes here. For those of you who might be watching a television view of this later on YouTube, I also found it confusing that when we talk about a local plan, we actually mean the district plan of the district council. And the neighbourhood plan is really what other people consider to be the local one. It gets quite confusing in that respect. In the discussions we've had so far, I've heard that Hepworth Brewery has no current limit on its production usage. Would the financial inducement being offered by Castle Properties Limited to Hepworth to pass on some of its water to this proposed development result in a limit of current consumption in perpetuity? My second point is Southern Water have advised that this would not affect the system. We understand that it won't affect Southern Water's system, but has Natural England made any statement that this will not affect abstraction at Hardham? Levelling up, the NPPF and the government and levelling up now places greater weight in the neighbourhood plan, i.e. that local planning should be bottom up now rather than top down. We went through a very large hiatus in the last couple of years to try and stop this top-down setting of targets, which we said were unrealistic for rural areas. And the government agreed with us, and in levelling up, they now say that we should give precedence to neighbourhood plans and be bottom-up and listen to local people rather than top-down. I also fail to see this argument of the more you use, the more you save. That seems a bit smoke and mirrors to me. How would this apply to other housing developments? You know, if we wanted to build 500 houses somewhere else and we could come along and say, well, the more water we use, if we put aerators on the taps, the more we're actually saving. So therefore it becomes water neutral. I mean, that is a complete nonsense. The more beer you brew must affect water abstraction at Hardham. Isn't this the case? 93%, I've heard my learned colleague here say, of the neighbourhood plan for his area, was it 93 or 97? 93%. I did hear it correctly, thank you. That would take up 93% of your consideration until 2041. Yeah, that seems a large chunk to be taking in the next couple of years. This was not put in the neighbourhood plan, this particular site, and the reason it probably, I don't know, but I'm guessing the reason it wasn't in the neighbourhood plan is because the parish did not want such a development in the neighbourhood plan, and that we should be listening to the parish and the local people in the neighbourhood. Could the officers perhaps comment? Thank you.
I respond there. In terms of reference to a financial inducement to Hepworth resulting in a limit to consumption in perpetuity, we're obviously not privy to any agreement that might be between the developer and Hepworth Brewery, but I'd very much doubt that there any is a limit to consumption. Ultimately, what's in front of us is a water mitigation scheme that proposes efficiencies at Hepworth Brewery based on consumption levels as they are today. It's not based on potential future consumption scenarios. All we are saying is that this level of saving would continue regardless of whether the Hepworth Brewery increased their water use in future, because it would still maintain a 9,000 litre a day saving. Reference has been made not twice now, just to 93% of the neighbourhood plan coming forward already. I'll just clarify that one of those sites is 170 homes at New Place Farm, which was a draft allocation in the neighbourhood plan in the first case. So this is the only site of these two applications that is coming forward outside of the framework of the neighbourhood plan. What you'll read in the officer report is that we have very carefully considered the status of the neighbourhood plan and acknowledge that it does carry significant weight in decision making. However, it does unfortunately fall in the gap where it doesn't benefit from the paragraph 14 protections because it's not a made neighbourhood plan, and we must make a decision based on the paragraph 11D tilted balance, the presumption in favour of development at this point in time. So we do consider obviously a negative that it doesn't have the support of the community through the neighbourhood plan process, but the officer's view is that does not outweigh the benefits when you apply the tilted balance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else? Councillor Trollope.
Thank you. I have a point to make and a question. The point I want to make is that I've been learning that a neighborhood plan, whilst to be respected, doesn't necessarily indicate the will of the people. So I would just be careful of assuming that because there is a plan put forward by the neighborhood council that it represents what the people of Holborough want. That may or may not be true. My question relates to the footbridge. I'm very conscious that the A29 do have very poor pavements, and I would be particularly concerned if mothers and fathers, I might add, have to take their children to school on an unsafe pavement. So can I have assurance from the officers that any such planning application indicates a firm and non-negotiable requirement to have a bridge which would allow a safe passage to school. Thank you.
Thank you. Officers, do you want to respond to that or?
Thank you. The delivery of the footprint is not specifically linked to this application. It's linked to the proposed development, or the approved development in outline for the 170 dwellings to the south. What Network Rail have asked for as a sort of proportional mitigation to the increased foot traffic across the at-grade crossing would be a sum towards provision of miniature stoplights. So what we would draft into the Section 106 agreement would be that the stoplights, financial contribution is secured for the provision of the stoplights in the event that the footbridge is not delivered within a sort of a specified period of time in relation to the southern development. So therefore there would be a benefit delivered by way of the current application site, although, as I said, it's not linked to the delivery of the footbridge itself, because it would not be a proportional request to deliver a footbridge, but that has been secured under the adjacent development. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Peter Vanderberg. Councillor Vanderberg.
Thank you. Just on water neutrality, I think what we're going to see more and more of is sort of innovative mechanisms and joint ventures and cooperations between industries, obviously development being the one that will be the driver. And we need to sort of understand where the savings are in these things. There is clearly a saving if you reduce the amount of water required to wash down a plant. By putting in mechanisms to do that, you will save water. If you then produce more beer, you will continue saving the same percentage of water. You will ultimately get to a point, presumably, where if you produce so much beer, that 9,000 litre saving will go. But until you reach that point, you're still saving water. And you're always saving water. If you put in a plant that saves 10% water on a clean down, it'll always save 10% water. We need to understand this, because this is our future now, is looking at these things, and we are going to see more and more innovation on this, hopefully. It's a shame it comes down to development to have to do it, frankly. You know, if the brewery could do it themselves, fantastic, but they can't. And so they need incentives to do that, and that's where this incentive is coming from. So we collectively need to understand, fully understand, the whole process of saving water to be able to make these decisions going forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Croker.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to draw members' attention to some interesting figures around sewage in that area. I note from some of the papers that Southern Water have calculated that 0.65 of a litre per second, which they estimate would come from this site, would have no impact on their network, which sounds jolly good, really, until you see that in 2022, the Pulborough sewage treatment works overflowed for 620 hours, so that's 26 days, into the River Store. And nearby Fittleworth actually managed nearly 2 months of overflowing. So that doesn't sound too promising. Looking at the flood risk assessment in a little bit of detail, I note that the sewage for this site will be pumped uphill into the main sewer running along the main road. Now that pump has a capacity quoted as 3 litres per second. So what's that, 4 or 5 times what Southern Water are calculating. And I have to ask, what could possibly go wrong? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Croker. Councillor Dennis.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to make a few points. I don't want to add, though I support many of the comments that you made, but I just wanted to make a few little points myself. Firstly, no one's actually thought what happens if Hepworth closes or actually moves, which is more than possible. So that's one thing we have to think of. Nothing is certain, and we've seen that all around the world and from the economy perspective. So, you know what, might not even be there following year. So that's one thought. Two other things. The other one I wanted to ask is, it was rather bemused by a comment that was made earlier by one of the speakers about the fact that apparently the residents wouldn't need cars. Thought that was quite an interesting perspective. Does that mean we're sort of going back to pre-war lives where nobody actually travelled anywhere? Because I don't think that's in reality is going to happen. It's a village, it's not a town to start with. And then thirdly, I'd like to ask, who's going to pay? Have you actually fully costed the stoplights? And when you said a contribution, was that to pay for it, fully inflation linked? Or is that actually just purely a contribution on an unknown figure?
Thank you. The contribution has been put forward by Network Rail, and it would pay for most of the provision of their miniature stoplights at grade crossing. But it's a proportional amount that they feel is appropriate for this level of development. But it's what they feel is an acceptable provision for the site.
Thank you. So obvious question is, who's paying for the rest?
Apologies. Just to clarify, this occurred on the other side with the bridge, but the commitment is that the developer pays for the bridge ultimately through the working with Network Rail to deliver it, and that would be the expectation here, that there'd be a clause saying no occupations of a certain number until the safe crossing has been provided. So it wouldn't be the case that the money comes to us and then someone else has to top it up. It is fundamental to the safety and acceptability of this development that there is a safe rail crossing in place. On the other point of what happens if Hepworth closes, well, straight away there'll be less water consumption coming out of the site. What then matters is what replaces Hepworth on that site, at which point there'd be this legal agreement that would show up on records, and that 9,000 litre a day saving would need to be retained by whoever comes forward on the site. So they may need to find their own water neutrality solution to make sure that that saving is maintained moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mill.
Thank you, Chair. I think we need to be very careful here. We're in danger of criticising officers for, first of all, telling us what the law is and then attempting to apply it. We're at liberty to vote whichever way we like, but it's their duty and professional duty to explain the law to the best of their knowledge. With regard to neighbourhood plans, I totally sympathise why parishes across the district are very, very frustrated and do feel that they've been rushed over, etc. But the problem, it isn't a Horsham problem, it is a national problem. Or to be specific, it's a government problem, it's a legislation problem. Neighbourhood plan legislation came before the local plan legislation, and in particular the standard method, which dictates our targets. They are in conflict with each other by their nature. So there's nothing we can do about that as Horsham. That has to be changed at a government level. It happens here, it happens around the country. It is not specifically a Horsham problem. I know Michael Gove is prone to saying things like we have no mandatory targets and bottom-up democracy or whatever, but they're just statements. They are not, it's what happens in law that matters. He has not changed the standard method. So that's what I feel about, we need to be careful on the neighbourhood plan issue. In terms of some of the other specific points, water neutrality, I really don't understand why this is such a problem. We had an excellent briefing, which not everyone attended. We had an excellent briefing from the officers on the water neutrality issue in particular. And the simple fact is that these measures would reduce water usage by approximately 9,000 litres or more if the company expands. If it shrinks or shrinks to nothing, then there is less water being used, in fact, zero. So either way, in terms of the development itself, it has reduced water usage, and that is all we are obliged to take into consideration here. As far as highways are concerned, yep, it's the traffic's terrible. I used to live in Pulborough. The traffic's pretty bad across the district. What do we do? Highways tell us it's okay. There's nothing we can do about that, and we haven't got a chance in appeal. We all know that, and I've been on a tour of a couple of our neighbouring planning committees in Mid Sussex and Arran recently, and they have the same problems, the same issues. This is just the state of affairs. I would also note that it wasn't carried into the local plan, but there was an application for at Adversane for approximately 3,000 houses just up the road, vastly greater traffic, but that too would have passed highways approval. So whilst I sympathise again with that situation, that is the law, that is the situation we have to deal with. The issue I am not happy about is the sewage issue, because that was the reason why it was withdrawn from the local plan and consultation with local members. And I'm pretty frustrated that such a short time afterwards, Southern Water have come back with apparent clarification that it's okay, and that's such a short time afterwards. I'm really bemused by that and frustrated by it, and I don't know what to think about it, because we spent a long time talking about this site, and sewage was the reason why it was held back. So that leaves me pretty conflicted on this one, but that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beard?
Yeah, just a quick one, something I may well have missed. Is the monitoring of Hepworth Brewery, is that all written down within it? Will you guys be, as the council, going out and checking up that they have put in all and everything that they're stating they're doing?
Yes, there'll be requirements from evidence that it's all been installed, is operational. There'll be legal obligations that they do operate, maintain these efficiencies in all time and allow us to inspect those at any time. Yes.
Thank you. So can I ask, are there any further questions, and then we'll come to the local councillors? Right, Paul Clark, Councillor Clark, would you like to?
If I may, Chairman, on a point of clarification, and I read from the email, our sewer network manager has advised that issues reported on Stain Street historically have been contributed by blockages and a collapsed sewer to which Southern Water have attended and rectified. We have heard that. What we've not heard is the next sentence. London Road has tended to be hydraulic overload issues where the sewer has become inundated with surface water as well as foul water flows. One sewer flows into another. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Campbell, would you like to speak?
I've got nothing more to add. Thank you, Chair.
And Ellis Brown.
Thank you. I have a question for the officer. Condition number 15. Pre-commencement slab level condition. How are we going to enforce that? And what, if they do breach that, what will we be doing about that? Is that, in essence, really enforceable, that condition? In particular, the garden external amenity spaces should not exceed 55 decibels. So if it does exceed 55 decibels, they've already gone up to slab level. On a pre-commencement condition, what action would we take on that one, should they breach that pre-commencement condition? Point D.
I think in summary, Councillor, this is a condition that's been recommended by our environmental health colleagues who are very stringent and understanding of noise environments and wouldn't be recommending conditions if they didn't feel it was achievable. So there is a requirement here for them to demonstrate how they would achieve that. It is over a 16-hour period for the garden noise impact, and therefore we consider that it is achievable, as do the applicants' acoustic experts. Thank you.
And but my question also is, if they were to fail that, would we take the necessary action against a breach of a pre-commencement condition?
Councillor, if I can just confirm, this is for a scheme to be submitted that meets those requirements. So ultimately, at the point of submission, our environmental health colleagues, who are obviously professional in in noise assessment would consider the scheme and consider whether the scheme then meets the requirements of the condition. And as long as that is implemented and retained, then it meets the requirements of the condition. Obviously, if there is an odd event and something's very, very loud, it doesn't mean that that breaches that condition, providing the scheme that is submitted is implemented and our colleagues consider that scheme meets that noise requirement, then that is acceptable. I hope that makes sense.
Yep, thank you very much. Thank you.
And the recommendation is to approve planning commission subject to appropriate conditions. I'll start that again, apologies. The recommendation is to approve planning permission subject to appropriate conditions listed in the committee planning report. Therefore, I propose we vote on this application. And can I ask those who are for this application to raise their hand, please? Those that are against?
That's 14 against.
And those that are abstaining?
That's 4 abstentions.
Thank you. Therefore, this application has been rejected. Oh, I'm sorry. Right. Okay. So can I put forward a motion to reject? Okay.
If I can just clarify, we've voted on the motion as printed. That motion has failed. So we need to consider whether there is an alternative motion. And if members consider there is an alternative motion, that needs to be considered and put forward and then seconded, and we vote on that. Obviously, the options open to members are to defer the application if you consider there are reasons on which could be addressed within a period of deferment, or to refuse the application. But obviously, if members are to refuse that application, you need to be able to substantiate what that reason for refusal is. And obviously, it needs to be a refusal which we can defend. So please think about that carefully. Thank you.
Councillor Trott.
I think there are two main concerns. I mean, there are many concerns I've heard people voice, but I think the two concerns that I think affected me the most, which prevented me from voting in favour, was the issue with sewage and also the issue of a safe passage to the schools. I would like people to consider the idea that if we could have those issues addressed, that perhaps we could reassess our position on this.
Thank you, Councillor Trollope. Would that be Councillor Clark?
May I ask a question of the head of development?
Yes.
I mean, the question really is, if we did defer this planning application for further information, would that be grounds for appealing on the grounds of non-determination?
It would be open if the extension of time is beyond that date. Which one? Yeah, then ultimately it will be open to the applicants to appeal determination. But obviously, if the applicants felt that they could address the concerns that members are raising, or that, there are ways in which that could be addressed, then they may wish to continue to pursue the planning application, not appeal. It's not really in an applicant's interest to appeal if there are matters that could potentially be addressed, but ultimately that's their decision.
Thank you.
Can I come back to Councillor? Councillor Mill.
Yeah, just to say, I would be content to move a motion to defer for clarification of the sewage issue and Southern Water's statement on it, because things have been raised that are not covered by the statement, and as I say, that was the reason it was taken out of the local plan as well. So I personally would be happy to defer on those grounds, but I understand that that might not cover everyone's everyone's concerns, so I might not carry the vote, but I'm just laying it out there. I would be happy to move that.
So you're putting that forward as a proposal, councillor Mill?
Yes.
Do you have a seconder? Okay. Did you want to speak, councillor Croker, or were you seconding? No seconding, thank you.
Before we go to the vote, can I just clarify, councillor Milne, your proposal is to defer to seek further information and clarification on matters of sewerage in relation to this site? Okay, thank you.
Yes, and to directly talk to Southern Water on it.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Trollope, yes.
Sorry, could that include, if a separate vote is necessary for it, so be it, but the issue of the footbridge? That's my main concern.
I think ultimately, my colleague said the footbridge is effectively a grampian condition. So
Just to be clear, when you talk about the footbridge, you're talking about across the level crossing directly adjacent to the site towards Newbridge Nurseries, is that correct?
No, I'm thinking more of a bridge or an underpass or something that provides absolute, non-interaction with having to cross, live train lines.
Yeah, so it's the level crossing that exists at the moment next to the site, where under the current proposals, the application in front of us is proposing the traffic light crossing, after which, when New Place Farm comes forward to deliver that development, it will install a stepped bridge instead. That's what's secured under both consents collectively.
Okay, if that's correct, then yes, perhaps just the sewage. Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
If I might modify the proposal, I mean, yes, on the sewage bit, I agree. The other issue, of course, is the access to the rest of the village, which is the issue of the footbridge instead of the at-grade crossing. So that needs to be clarified, because what would need to be clarified is the crossing mitigation strategy, because as has been said by officers, the money doesn't cover the whole cost. So sewage, the at-grade crossing mitigation needs to be clarified. And despite what is said about county highways, knowing the road as I do and where it is situated, like the highways mitigation needs to be revisited as well. And I think I would include that as well, Councillor Mill, if you would agree. I'm nervous at that because I don't think highways ever agree to anything, so it depends what you're talking about. The reason why I propose it is because the exit of this development is right on the 40 mile an hour, 30 mile an hour speed limit, and the splays aren't in place. So the mitigation has not been proven. So that would need to be addressed. That's why I'm proposing it. I would ask the officer if she thinks that's credible.
members, it's your decision at the end of the day. Obviously, we've discussed the position of the Highway Authority. If members feel there are matters that haven't been explained or explored, then it is open to you to include that in a deferral. That decision rests with you, really.
In which case I'd be content to include it. Yeah. Yes, to include it.
So we seem to have a three-part motion, as I understand it.
My understanding is Councillor Milne is putting forward an amended motion now. Is that true, Councillor Milne?
Yep.
Which now includes the crossing mitigation strategy and the highway mitigation revisited, in particular in relation to the access. So as you've amended your motion, I would suggest that needs to be seconded again, and then we go to the vote.
Councillor Clark.
Seconded.
Seconded, yeah. All those in favour of this motion?
That's 17 in favour.
Thank you. Those against?
1 against.
And any abstentions?
No abstentions.
Thank you. So that motion is carried. And I'll now hand back to Councillor Ellis-Brown.
request for a 2-minute break, so I will commence in 2 minutes. Thank you, everyone, for coming back. Item number 7 on the agenda is St Mary's Gate, the street, Washington. Please could the We've lost an item, it's okay. The street, Washington, please could the officer present the application?
Good evening. Before I start, please note there's a small typo in the report at paragraph 5.1 bullet point 6. It should read that the variation should not be allowed rather than be allowed. So this application relates to a detached dwelling located within the Washington Conservation Area, immediately adjacent to a series of Grade 2 listed buildings as shown here. The application seeks retrospective planning permission for the installation of UPVC windows to a side extension to the property. The side extension was granted in 2018 subject to a condition requiring that all materials, including windows, match the type, colour and texture of the existing dwelling. This image shows the location of the extension granted in 2018 as highlighted yellow and also the relevant condition. This is the front of the dwelling as it currently appears, with the extension now built. This is the dwelling prior to the extension being constructed. Note the windows are timber rather than crittle as referred to in the officer report. This condition relates only to the windows installed in the extension. The dwelling otherwise benefits from permitted development rights to change the windows in the main part of the house, provided they are of similar appearance to the existing windows. The appellants have replaced the original timber windows with UPVC under these permitted development rights. In order to ensure the windows retain detailing consistent with the original windows and some of the more historic windows in the area, it has been agreed that glazing bars will be added to all the windows to the dwelling as shown on these plans. The dwelling is located in a backland environment such that it has minimal visibility in the street and from other public vantage points. Given the modern design of the dwelling and its backland location, officers are of the view that the new windows with the further addition of glazing bars do not harm the character or appearance of the conservation area or the setting of nearby listed buildings. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions as set out in the report. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you very much. Could I invite Elizabeth Lawrence, please, to speak? Please note you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. St Mary's Gate is one of a pair of modern houses dating back to the 1960s. They are of absolutely no particular architectural merit or historic merit. The house is set a considerable distance back from both the street scenes and is very well screened by the topography, banks, planting and houses. The standard materials condition imposed in 2018 permission was applied to ensure that the extension matched the host dwelling to ensure that it didn't appear as an add-on. At that time, the existing windows were a mixture of wood and aluminium with small and large panes on different elevations. They looked disjointed, bulky and detracted from the character, appearance and quality of the dwelling and its setting. The applicants replaced the former windows with highly energy efficient and slimline windows that are visually discreet. They are not the bulky, smooth UPVC windows that have such a bad reputation. They are top-end grained slimline windows, and from all public views, they are not visually distinguishable from slimline painted timber casement windows. The replacement of the former windows did not require permission, as you've already been told. In the spirit of condition 3, the applicants correctly, in my view, used windows that match the refurbished original dwelling. To put heavy and bulky small paned windows, timber windows in the extension would be inconsistent with the original part of the dwelling as it is now and would look dreadful. They would appear discordant, cluttered and would harm the dwelling and its setting. With climate change needs facing us, it would be ludicrous to remove these highly efficient and discreet windows for bulky, inefficient windows made from cheap imported softwood. We're happy for you to condition the replacement windows in the future, and you could ask for glazing bars. Personally, I think, looking at the photographs of before and after, that the current casement clear windows are far superior and more discreet than putting glazing bars in. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to come back as well?
All I'd say, members, is that we do have applied a condition for the glazing bars. So if members feel that the current arrangement as shown on this photograph is superior, then we can always remove that condition if that's what's wished. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Local ward members, Councillor Fisher. Councillor Beard.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm really conflicted about this situation. We are within the Washington Conservation Zone, and our village is gorgeous, and I hold it very dear to my heart. The house is visible. There have been some trees felled, so you can see it both from School Lane, but only just at angles. And my biggest, the conservation area is something that we should cherish and preserve as much as we can. I also just want to comment on how the local residents and parish council also hugely are objecting to this due to the fact that it is our conservation area and the houses within it in the area and the window types that have been used already. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Officer would like to respond? Sorry, yes, Councillor Fisher, apologies.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have much to add to what Emma said. I too am conflicted. I think it's very important that if there's a conservation area, then the guidelines are adhered to, because otherwise it's a free-for-all, and we're setting a precedent. However, given that materials, we don't live on a finite planet, it seems very difficult to change something that's perfectly well functioning. So I feel very conflicted, and I haven't quite come anywhere off a kind of middle way at the moment, but thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg.
Thanks, Chair. I haven't really got much to add to that. I'm like my colleagues, I'm really conflicted about this one as well.
Thank you. Officer, would you like to respond?
I'll only just point out and reiterate that in a conservation area, single dwelling houses benefit from permitted development rights to replace windows, provided they have similar appearance. That doesn't mean to say the same material. And in this case, they are white framed windows. So this is not the only house in the conservation area which benefits from that permitted development rights. And in the wider area, there are one or two, not many, but one or two houses that have got UPVC windows. In conservation areas, generally we look to try and retain historic detailing as far as possible. In this context, as I said, this is more of a modern building in a backland environment. It perhaps would be a different scenario if it was in a prominent location and of a more aged housing stock. However, in this case, apologies, the lights of the screens keep coming and going, don't they? But in this case, in these particular circumstances, the officers are of the view that there would be no harm to the historic character of the area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any comments from elsewhere? Councillor Trollope.
Thank you. What struck me just from looking at the photograph that used to be on the screen, it's still in my memory. I to be honest with you, I can't really notice from the smallness of it any difference in the windows, but what I do notice is a distinct difference in the shading of the tiles, and I don't know if I could just have some guidance from the officers as to whether or not that's a consideration that is important or not.
Apologies, I'm trying to wrestle with two things at once here, which is not my skill set, but yeah, we have got some gremlins, but in terms of the tiles, they do of similar appearance will match the host building. It's just they have newer stocks, they haven't weathered in as fast yet. Ultimately, the issue here in front of us is the windows only in this situation. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other points? Yeah, Councillor Croker.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like some confirmation that the original windows were basically small panes. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct that the windows there. It was one of my other photographs right at the start, but they did have small panes, correct.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh,
Roger had his hand up as well.
apologies, Roger. Councillor Knoll, did you have your hand up?
No, sorry. That's enough.
Councillor Knowles.
Officers, can I ask a question? Sorry, I realise you're multitasking.
I'm still listening, yes.
Yes. Okay. There is a picture up now on the screen, which is great. Could we see the original? And can you also confirm, because I think the speaker said that the house was a mixture of this type of window and larger panes as well originally?
This is the only elevation I have an image of, but I take the applicant's word for it. This is the rear elevation that does show the small panes to the house.
Thank you. Could you show, I saw the other day a picture of an adjacent property as you come close towards this house. Do you still have that? See, that's the one. The house on the right-hand side.
Yes, I believe those are metal framed windows. They're not plastic, but they are of a different style, shall we say. So they do have thin profiles to them.
They're not inconsistent with what's already there.
Correct, yes. They don't have the small panes, no.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to comment?
Sorry, can I just have some clarification now? The newer house to the right in the lower picture is in the conservation area, is it?
That's correct, yes.
And they've got what sort of windows?
I believe it's metal framed windows, so quite old style.
Okay. But, yeah, okay, all right.
Any other councillors wish to comment or have a question? No? Okay. Sorry.
If I may, I'd like to raise a motion that we change the application and allow them to keep these windows without adding the extra bars.
You have a seconder with that motion? Okay. Okay. All those in favour?
That's 8 in favour.
Oh gosh, you're not down there. All those against? 9.
Sorry, did you have your hand up? That's 9 against.
Abstention? Abstention?
Oh, God, again.
Motion's failed. Yes, that's fine. Motion has failed.
Therefore, that motion has failed. Okay, so we're now considering the recommendation of the officers to approve the application as per the planning committee papers. Did you have, sorry, Councillor Beard, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted, the view there is the houses on the opposite side are the one directly opposite, which you can't see, is one of the older houses, and it does have the panes in it and is definitely made out of wood. And that is a story that is dotted around, but the one closest and opposite, just so everyone is aware that you've got this metal frame there and then you've got their plastic UVCs, the one opposite is wood and smaller panes.
Okay, thank you. All right, the motion, to vote on the recommendation as per the planning committee report is to recommend that this is approved. All those in favour, please.
For.
All those against?
No, we've got 1, 2,
Any abstentions? No. Therefore, the recommendation to approve has been approved. Thank you. Next item. Item number 8 is the DC 2194 land north of Backset Town Farm in Henfield. Please could the officer make the presentation, please?
Good evening. This application relates to the corner of an open field at the entrance to Backset Town Farm off Furness Lane in Henfield. Furness Lane provides access to a number of rural homes to the east of the site, with the nearest homes to the west falling within the defined settlement boundary of Henfield. Backset Town Farm to the south comprises 4 domestic address points, including one for a mobile home. Planning permission was granted in 2021 for the removal of the mobile home and its replacement with a single-storey 2-bedroom bungalow. This permission is extant and can be constructed without the need to demonstrate water neutrality. This current application seeks to relocate the bungalow to the north to the junction of the farm access with Furness Lane. The dwelling in all other respects is identical to that approved in 2021. This plan shows the relationship between the two sites, the farm and the Henfield settlement boundary. This is the site access from Furness Lane, and this is the site itself. This is the floor plan of the dwelling, and these are the elevations. The dwelling would no longer sit close to the cluster of buildings and homes that forms the Backset Town Farm complex. Whilst the dwelling would now be located in the corner of the open field to the north, it would nevertheless form part of an existing ribbon development along Furness Lane in moderate proximity to the existing homes to the west. In this context, officers are of the view that it would not appear unduly out of place and would not result in harm to the rural character of the area. The application is therefore recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the report and a legal agreement to ensure only either this development or the previously approved development can be lawfully carried out, and to ensure also that the mobile home is removed from Backset Town Farm. Please also note that the extant planning permission expires on the 15th of February this year. This means that the fallback provision for water neutrality will no longer exist after this date. Accordingly, the recommendation in the report needs to be updated to read as follows: to delegate authority to the Head of Development and Building Control to approve planning permission, subject to the completion of a Section 106 legal agreement and appropriate conditions, and subject to clarification from the applicants that planning permission reference DC 201500 has commenced on site by no later than the 15th of February 2024. In the event such evidence of commencement has not been satisfactorily provided, to refuse permission on the grounds that water neutrality has not been demonstrated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have no public speakers, so Councillor Potts, would you like to?
Thank you, Chairman. Whilst I'm not too happy with the reasons behind the extant permission, that is not a material consideration. So in this instance, I'm inclined to support the officer recommendation. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Councillor Croker.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at this application, it seems that we're trading what might be regarded as a development of a cluster of buildings around a farm site with ribbon development along a country lane. As such, I'm somewhat inclined to oppose it because I don't like ribbon development. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Dennis.
Yeah, I'm sort of inclined to think the same as well. And also what I would say is the mobile home is currently on a brownfield site and they're proposing to move it now to a greenfield site.
In terms of the ribbon development question here, this is a unique scenario where there's an existing permission for a dwelling in the farm complex here. So in many regards, it'd be a one-off and not set a precedent for further new dwellings along Furness Lane in a sporadic manner. And that informs the officer recommendation to you. Yes, the mobile home does form part of the sort of complex there, and this would be arguably more out on a limb in the corner of the field. But as I sort of explained, there is an element of ribbon development along there such that it wouldn't, our officer's view is that it wouldn't cause significant landscape harm sufficient to warrant refusal of permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I recognise the legal advice given to us by our barrister about this sort of location in terms of water neutrality, so I don't have any comments to make on water neutrality and the principles in planning terms behind this. However, I think in this report we just slipped up on one thing. In para 3.2 it says that it is suggested, if minded to approve, that a measured tree survey be done to retain the oak tree that could potentially be affected by this development. And basically, if that is correct, and I respect our tree, I can't say the word, tree guy, why is there nothing in the conditions? Because if I look at condition 5, it's all about hard and soft landscaping, etc., etc. But there is no, I can't find anything in the pre-occupation conditions that a measured tree survey or measures be taken to protect that oak tree. So should we decide to go forward with this, I would like to propose an amendment to the proposal before council.
Before we take that, just, officer, do you like to respond at all? Or?
We can certainly add a condition asking for a measured survey of the oak tree and means for protection during and after construction works.
Okay. Councillor Knoll.
Can we also, in that condition, can we also include the root area, because oak trees have very large and long-reaching roots?
Absolutely, yes, that would be included, but I'll make it clear in the wording. Thank you.
Okay, before we move forward on that proposal, could I ask if there are any other comments to be made? Councillor Fisher.
Just like some clarification around the ecology of going from a brown site to a green site. That makes sense? So I'd just like some clarification around officer's view on going from a brownfield site to a greenfield. Yeah. Thank you.
Reviewing the report, the ecologists weren't specifically consulted on this development. They weren't, no. It is in the corner of an open field, and suitable mitigations through conditions and landscaping schemes could be included along with further conditions for enhancement if that was felt necessary. Thank you.
Any final questions before the motion? Councillor Dennis.
On that point about the brownfield site, if it is moved to the greenfield site, what happens to the brownfield site? Will that have to go back to being a greenfield site that it previously was, or will that continue to be used as a brownfield site?
No, the legal agreement would require that the mobile home is removed from the land there, so there'd be no prospect of another dwelling being granted on that parcel of land. At the moment, from reviewing aerial photographs, it looks like it's an area sort of gravel hard standing associated with the farm complex. There'd be no requirement to return it to greenfield land to mitigate the new house to the north of the site. There wouldn't be a planning purpose for that, should we say.
So there's no requirement to do anything to keep it as a brownfield. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Could you just remind me of the proposal? Did you capture that, Adrian? I didn't. Recommendation, yes. Yes, please.
Okay, just to repeat the recommendation, which I appreciate is very long. It's to delegate authority to the Head of Development and Building Control to approve planning permission subject to the completion of a Section 106 legal agreement and appropriate conditions, and subject to clarification from the applicants that planning permission DC 201500 has commenced on site by no later than the 15th of February 2024. In the event evidence of commencement has not been sufficiently provided, to refuse permission on the grounds that water neutrality has not been demonstrated. And this is on the basis that planning permission with a legal agreement is unlikely to be secured within 3 weeks from the date of today, which is when the permission runs out. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Clark.
On point of order, there is no mention of the modified condition.
I'm just coming to that. I just wanted to understand. Sorry.
Section 106 and appropriate conditions, including an additional condition to secure the measured survey of the oak tree, means of root protection during and after construction works, including its root protection area.
Okay. Councillor Fisher, you're seconding that, or you got a question?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we could add putting in an ecological report as a condition. It seems very odd to move from a brownfield to a greenfield site without having actually assessed what's
Can I just clarify? I think we can't 100% confirm the existing site is a brownfield site. Agricultural land is not brownfield land. Now, obviously, there is a mobile home on it, so I think, but what we have to bear in mind, it's not necessarily the case that you're going from brownfield to greenfield. I think that's a farm is not generally a brownfield site because it's an agricultural use. So I think we just have to be mindful of saying that is a fact, because I don't think that's necessarily the case. But in terms of your ecology point, obviously that is a material planning matter which we can consider. Generally speaking, if you are concerned about ecology, it's not a matter that you can condition. So if you feel that you need to see details of ecology in order to consider whether the application is acceptable or not, then I think that's a matter that needs to be either delegated or deferred. Obviously, the officer's view is that essentially it's an agricultural field or low ecology value, and you've got an existing track there. But obviously, if members felt that was necessary to make a decision, then I would suggest that it's delegated or deferred for further information in that respect. Thank you.
Councillor Trollope.
Thank you. Sorry, just in the spirit of fairness to this person making the application, I need to understand, if possible, the effect of our motion. Will that negate their ability to benefit from water neutrality? Because I don't see how they could do such a study before the 15th of February.
If they implement in some way the existing permission that they've got, dig a footing or whatever, and building control inspect it, it's kind of what you call a technical commencement really. But ultimately, if they commence that development in some way, then lawfully that remains a fallback position which they could rely on to offset that water neutrality. And as my colleague said, in any event, even if you were to agree it today, a legal agreement is required, which would take more than 3 weeks to sign. So this permission, even if you resolve to grant it, would not be issued before the other application expired. So they would have to do that in any event.
We have a proposal to recommend with the rather verbose recommendation, but we need to cover that. And then we've got addition of a condition to that. Do I have a proposer? Sorry, Josh, you were raising your hand. Sorry. Are you okay? Fine. Have we got a proposer for that condition to be added to this? Yes, Councillor Clark. Seconder? Okay. All those in favour?
That's 19-4.
Any all against? Any against? No.
That's unanimous.
Any abstention? Unanimous. Okay, apologies. Therefore, the application is approved as per the appropriate conditions and the committee planning report and completion of section 106 agreement. Thank you very much. Is urgent business. I don't have any, But I'd just like to thank the officers for their participation and their background work this evening to these rather challenging applications. So thank you very much, and thank you for your patience this evening. And at 19:41, I bring the meeting to a close.
I'm in a bit of a hurry.
Okay, sorry. The meeting has closed, but I've had the request that would you be so kind as to take your empty glasses and cups and put them on the table so we don't have to scurry around to collect them. Otherwise, I'll have to nominate someone apparently.